What happens when you hire the wrong lawyer for your criminal case? I'm attorney Danny Izquierdo of the Izquierdo Law Firm, and I want to share a client success story with you to show you exactly what can happen if you're charged with a crime in Florida and you go and hire the wrong lawyer. See, this individual that we represented recently was charged with a third-degree felony for grand theft of a vehicle. Upon being arrested, he immediately came in for an initial 4-point case evaluation and strategy session with us. However, he decided to hire a different lawyer. 2 years after this arrest and the initial strategy session with our office, this client called our office again. And immediately upon reviewing the notes of that call, I remembered the case. And I remembered the case because it had a very unique fact pattern that was atypical or wildly different from your typical grand theft of a vehicle or grand theft auto. And that's because this revolved around an 18-wheeler, a truck that he used to drive for work all over the country, refusing to pick up a load in Virginia before making his way back to Miami because he claimed that the employer wasn't paying his wages. And now the employer was accusing him of depriving them of the 18-wheeler and also using company credit cards to pay for personal expenses such as his cell phone bill, credit card bills, and not just the gas that he was to use those credit cards for. Immediately upon calling the office 2 years later, we again scheduled him to come in. He really wanted a second opinion after working with this other lawyer for 2 years on his case. And his big hang up here was that the judge was now pushing the case to trial, and his lawyer was trying to get him to agree, take a plea basically, to the grand theft of a vehicle as charged. And in exchange for that plea, this client would be convicted. He would have to be on probation for a period of 5 years, and he would be expected to pay back $20,000 in restitution. When I started going through the strategy session with him again, it became apparent that this lawyer hadn't taken depositions, hadn't really done much to work up the case and really get to know this client's story in order to advocate on his behalf and truly fight for him. We agreed to take the case on with a very short timeline. The judge was adamant that this case be ready for trial within a couple of months. Thankfully, this client hired us. I was able to spring into action immediately and really get to know his story, the case, and the facts, and the really minor details that this case ended up turning on. I like to joke that I essentially became an expert in the trucking industry. Back then, I could tell you all about how DOT laws work, where the trucking checkpoints are on the highway, what gas stations truckers like to go to, and which credit card could be used at what gas station, and how it's limited to that. And long story short, on the eve of trial, we were able to better this client's situation, and not just a little bit. Remember, he was facing a conviction, 5 years of probation, and $20,000 of restitution. Because of the work we were able to do preparing this case for trial and really getting to know that client's story, we convinced the prosecutor to let our client go into a diversion program. And in addition to going into the diversion program, where he would simply just take one class, he also does not have to pay a penny of restitution. That's right. He went from $20,000 in restitution to the prosecutor completely waiving any obligation of restitution whatsoever. And that's because we really took the time to look at the evidence, to decipher what the alleged victim was saying, and be able to show the prosecutor that that's not really how it went down, and this evidence may have been altered altogether. Thankfully for this client, he did not get burned by hiring the wrong lawyer because he ended up coming back to us. But I like telling this story as an example of what can happen and how two outcomes could be so wildly different by simply hiring the wrong lawyer. And I'm thankful every day that this client decided to right that initial wrong or lapse in judgment and come back and hire us, because we were able to get him an awesome outcome, which preserved his freedom, preserved his future, and allowed him to go back into the world without a conviction, with a case that was dismissed because it was unjust and based on false allegations in the first place. I'm not so sure that would have happened had he stayed with the lawyer that he had. That lawyer was not prepared, probably would have forced him into taking that plea, or would have gone to trial if the client insisted while being unprepared, and it probably would not have had such a positive result. When you're in the need of a criminal defense attorney, you need to make sure you do your homework, you do your due diligence, because who you hire is extremely important, and as I've just highlighted, could make all the difference in the world.